Hello, my beautiful, powerful, everyday women of the world. Welcome to the Startup Stories podcast, where the ambitious, everyday woman is heard, held, and served in life first and business. I'm your host, Mia Frankel of Powerful Inc., the everyday woman's coach for living a peaceful and productive life. I'm living it. It's true. You can have it too. You'll hear relatable stories to keep you sane, grounded, and growing as you expand yourself and deliver your purpose to the world. And today we're going to meet another stellar example of exactly this journey. Joining me is Lindsay Pinchuk, an award-winning entrepreneur. She's fancy, ladies, but she's also just very real. So let's not get lost in the accomplishments. We're going to get to know her heart and the woman behind the business and what that looks like for her. But she does have an impressive portfolio, and I do want to honor and recognize that, especially because Lindsay feels like a future version of me. Oh, hashtag girl crush. It's just fun
Thank
to
you.
meet women further along and then to be able to engage in conversation to see what that journey's been like, because it helps diffuse the unfamiliar and ask questions, get curious, make real what a journey could be from a $500 investment in a company called Bump Club and Beyond that grew into a seven-figure brand with over 3 million people involved every month. Like the the juxtaposition of that spectrum is a bit mind-blowing. And, who was Lindsay through that journey? And here's what I really admire about the research that I've exposed myself to in her world so far is that she's continuously evolving and she's still just very much, I'm going to say it, like an everyday woman who's dealing with kids and relationship and school schedules and, all those different ordinary logistics while running an incredible business. And so holding all of who she is in one woman and what that journey looks like is, of course, going to be the conversation of today. So that when you're looking at your startup $500 investment or whatever it is, that you see what's available when you lean into yourself and let the business take you on a journey. So, welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Mia, for having me, and thank you for such a lovely introduction.
Oh, it's my pleasure and my honor. I have so much fun getting to know my guests and then just like leaning in and seeing what it activates in me too, right? And seeing what it brings out. So take us through it. Like your website has a beautiful about page with a long story of, well, because we're whatever age we are, guys. I just turned 44. It was my birthday yesterday.
Happy
Um,
birthday.
Thank you. It's my first episode as a 44-year-old, so it's going to be good. But in that, so much life happens, and we probably just go, "Oh God, I'm 44, whatever age." But if you think about every single day of those years, or even 20 years of it, like it's a lot of story to capture. So, in your own words, tell us who you used to be and how you got to, and how you grew to this version of yourself today.
Yeah, so like I said, thank you so much for having me. Um, I guess I'm going to start with the fact that I never envisioned myself as an entrepreneur. That was
Mhm.
not something that was really in the cards for me. That was, I don't know, it didn't seem like it was something that I even wanted or knew about. I had an amazing corporate career. I worked in magazine and ad sales for magazines, and those people who know me and have known me forever know that I wanted to be a journalist. I very much wanted to work at a magazine, and when I graduated college and I ended up getting my first job, I got it in ad sales, and it opened up my eyes and the doors to a whole new world that I
Mhm.
didn't know existed. That was actually much more lucrative than
Mhm.
being a journalist, and I still was able to work at a magazine.
Right.
So for 10 years I worked in the magazine industry, and it's obviously very different today than it is then. It doesn't really exist as much anymore.
Yeah.
But I worked at Sports Illustrated. I worked at
Mm.
at the Hearst Corporation for Good Housekeeping and Red Book and just some of the biggest titles
Mhm.
out there. And
Yeah.
I loved what I did. And I think it's really important to say that because I didn't want to leave. I wasn't looking to leave. And when I got pregnant, I didn't have any I didn't have any family friends that were close by me in Chicago that were also pregnant. And I knew that I
Mm.
needed community of women
Okay.
who were going through what I was going through. And, so I was this person who would get up and go to work every day. And I was an overachiever. I still am an overachiever. I was the youngest person on the floor at Hearst in
Mhm.
Chicago who held my position. Most of the women who were around me, had kids in high school at the time,
Right.
maybe even college. And like I said, I loved what I did, but I started hosting events for pregnant women because I
Okay.
needed to be around other women who were pregnant. And I'm not a half-asser, and I used my knowledge in ad sales and sponsorships, and I started reaching out to brands to be like, hey, I have these women coming to events. Do you want to send some product? Do you want to send a prize for a raffle? Do you
Okay.
want to sponsor it? And what ended up happening was I ended up growing this business. The first, let's call it the first 6 months were me hosting events 2 times a month in Chicago. It
Mhm.
was before social media was a thing.
Right.
So it was all word of mouth, but I had 50 to 100 women that were showing up.
Wow.
I had my daughter in October of 2010, and I went on maternity leave. And
Mhm.
I always tell people that if I would have started Bump Club with my second daughter, there would have been no Bump Club because she didn't sleep for 10 years, literally. So, literally,
I
she
have
still
one of
doesn't sleep.
those.
But my first daughter started sleeping after 6 weeks. And I say that because a lot of people, when I say it, are like, oh, you're so lucky. And I'm like, yes, but like God made up for it with the second one. So, but I'm glad it happened in this order, right? Because I had a maternity leave where my daughter slept a lot and I was
Yeah.
able to pour time into this
Yeah.
business. And when you are doing something that you feel so passionately about, it doesn't feel like work. And a lot of people will
Mhm.
say to me, but like you were on maternity leave, you should have been resting. I am the type of person who thrives on being busy. And
Yeah.
so for me, it was feasible to check my email and send out emails. And I had all these ideas. And so I started this company that ended up, I went back to work after my maternity leave. I
Okay.
had a huge asshole of a boss
Mm.
who was recently divorced, past childbearing age, and was incredibly mean to me.
Wow.
And she told me, I know that you have this side hustle, and if I find out you're doing it on my time, there's going to be repercussions. And for me, that was ridiculous because I was an overperformer in my role.
Mhm.
And I said to my husband, if I don't leave now, then this is going to be a bad situation.
Yeah.
And so I took a chance and I said to myself, what's the worst that happens? Right? What's the worst
Yeah.
that happens? This job doesn't pan out or this company doesn't pan out and I go back and find another job. There are always
Okay.
jobs to be had.
Yeah.
And can I live with that? And the answer was yes. And so I left after a couple of weeks of returning from maternity leave and I spent the next 9 years growing this company.
Um,
um, we were hosting events in 35 different cities across the country. We were
wow.
working with brands like Nordstrom and Target and
Mhm.
all the baby brands and Unilever
Mhm.
and Kimberly Clark. And eventually I sold it. I was approached for sale by three different companies and I sold it to the one who wanted my relationship with Target. And after I
Yeah.
sold it, I I worked there for 2 years. It was a horrible situation. It wasn't like
Oh.
going back and working corporately for the Hearst Corporation, which
Mhm.
I loved. It
Mhm.
was going back and working corporately for people who had, there was a lot of red tape, there were a lot of restrictions. No one cared about my vision anymore. They really kind of sold me a bag of goods. And
Mhm.
so, about 2 years in, I realized that I was incredibly depressed. I didn't want to be doing this anymore and I decided to make my exit. And when I exited, I did so and I said, you know what, moving forward in this 3.0 of mine,
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure that I am supporting women business owners. I want to share all of my knowledge and experience with them so that they don't make the kind of mistakes that I do and that they can grow their businesses very simply the way I did. And so when I left, I started consulting, I started mentoring, and then I started Dear FoundHer, which is now, it started as a podcast, but it's a community and an event space for women over 40 who have businesses. And it really has become this 3.0 of mine. And um, I will say that, a lot of people ask me, because you kind of, and I know this has been a long answer, but you said to me, who is the person that is Lindsay? And a lot of people said to me, um, are you upset? Are you mourning the fact that you left this company and that it didn't pan out the way you wanted to? And my answer is always no, because without that experience, I couldn't be doing what I'm doing now. And I'm the happiest I've ever been.
Sure. There's, there's no such thing as too long of an answer. There's so much in there. And if the listeners aren't hearing it, we'll try and help pull some of it out. Um, Very at the onset, you created what you needed. So the bump club became the community you needed. So to the woman listening who's sitting there hoping, waiting, searching for, talk to Lindsay or I or anybody else in my world, and let's move your butt. Just move your butt, woman. Okay? You're a proper grown-up. You want something, go and make it happen. That's how I operate. That's how I'm creating the community and opportunities coming to me. And that's how Lindsay just like rocket shipped through that 10-year period of life. And it's possible for an everyday regular woman to go out there and do that. That's where these stories come from. The other cool thing is all of the achievements, I'm going to say, that happened parallel to motherhood, marriage, bills, school. Like, it's so glamorous. She quit her job and started a company and la 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 la. She was newly a mom, then she got pregnant again. Over 9 years, that means you're registering your kids in school. You're acclimatized, like kindergarten took me for a ride. I was like, what on earth is this school thing?
It's interesting that you say that, and I think it's really important to point out we made a lot of very conscious changes when I left my corporate job. I mean, and I'm not shy to talk about this. I had an incredibly amazing salary. I had an expense account. I was doing really well for someone who was in their late 20s, early 30s. And it was a very big decision for me to leave this job. And so we made changes, but for me, I wanted to be able to go to music classes with my daughter. I wanted to be able to see her during the day. I wanted to be able to be a part of her life. Not to say that I couldn't if I was in corporate. However, the job that I left required a ton of travel. I mean, I later traveled a ton for Bump Club, but it was on my schedule, not anyone else's. I was traveling 2 weeks of the month. It felt very cumbersome to me to be a brand new mom and have to do this. And so when I did leave corporate America to start my company, there were a lot of financial changes that we made as a household. And the biggest one was we had hired a full-time nanny, and it was a nanny share. And I went to her and I said, I'm making a change. Would you be okay if we joined the share 3 days a week? And she said yes. And she did not have to say yes because it was less money for her. I ended up getting back up to 5 days a week. But my goal with the first year of Bump Club was to pay the nanny, not even to pay myself. It was to pay the nanny. And I did because and I used every minute of time that my daughter was with her, Patricia, like literally, I mean, I will never forget her, to start my business. It wasn't like I was going for lunches or getting manicures or doing things like that. When my daughter was with the nanny,
Yeah.
I was busting my butt with my business because, there were 2 days a week that I didn't have the nanny, and I had to make that change accordingly. So I think it's really important to point out this wasn't just like I'm going to quit my job and start this. Like there were a lot of conscious decisions that went into place, and there were a lot of changes that went into place.
But it's not a side that I often see glamorized, across the internet and the coach space. Coaching is feels like it's been treated like a commodity and like a get rich quick to a certain extent. And that's a whole other tangent of mine. But this is this is the piece of how you're running your business, right? And to the startup because I know how delicious and tantalizing and um, like oxytocin inducing the new idea can be. But if you can, like Lindsay, kind of sit in the long game frame of mind and have and hold the vision, that's going to hold you steady every single day for those 9 years plus two in case of the bump club for it to come through to what it can come through to, whatever size that may be. And I speak from my lived experience of that, where I was chasing and rushing and running, almost like on a train whizzing by, where you just see a blur of what's out there. But in the meantime, you've passed, unicorns and I don't know, a maternity ward of cute babies and a box of kittens and maybe a handsome prince, but you're just whoosh and you're missing life. And so I really appreciate the different approach that you took and the mindset, the self-leadership in building this with deep intention and integrated into your life. And then the conversations with your husband, like, is this deepened the marriage, increased your admiration to each other? It's a partnership, even if they're not in business together.
And I couldn't have done this without my husband. I mean, no way. And I can't do what I do now without my husband either. His support is tremendous. It's interesting that you say that because what you were just saying, because when I was starting this business, I mean, there was a long time that like I didn't pay myself.
Mhm.
I eventually did, and it was great. And I had this life stage business. I wasn't paying myself what I was making in corporate America. However, I did see the vision and I did see the end result and I did see the growth and I knew that it would take time. The other thing that was very very important was I was building a life stage business for myself. Like you talked about it at the top of this, like I built this community for me.
Mhm.
And yes, maybe I wasn't paying myself what I was making at Hearst. However, I was working with every single brand in the baby space
Mhm.
and I never once paid for anything for my
Right.
children. Okay. Like, so
Right.
even though I wasn't paying myself like in dollars and cents at first, like, because
Mhm.
it was probably 2 years until I actually took any money, but I never bought a diaper. I
Right.
never bought formula when I switched from breastfeeding. And actually, my daughter had some crazy gastric thing and I had to put her on special formula that cost a fortune. And guess what? The Abbott Labs rep used to drop it at my house and I never paid for it. I never bought a stroller. I never bought a car seat. I didn't buy a crib mattress. When both of my kids moved into big beds, Naturepedic gave me mattresses for them. I mean, I never paid for anything.
Wow.
Photography for my family. We were constantly asked to be photographed. I was given
Right.
tickets to events. I was being invited to events. Like it was an amazing
Mhm.
opportunity, not just for me, but for my family. And so, and those things add up.
Oh
And,
my God.
and I wasn't paying taxes on them. So, it was an amazing opportunity for my family in addition to just me building this business. And I did see what it could be over the long run. And that's why I stuck with it.
That, thank you for that because I'm like, oh, I'm feeling it so deep where, again, we might think we're chasing a revenue or we're chasing a big launch and we want to sensationalize, our sales post, our sales, but there's so value comes in different ways and provision comes in different ways. And if you can really see, I'm going to say like the forest for the trees, as you just beautifully described, there's so much value, never mind all the skills and logistics and connections and fulfillment that you get to have as part of that business and that business model is huge. And so, yes, let us not put the goalpost only on the money. Let it be a full ecosystem around you. Never, like for me, the women, the quality of women that I've met and like yesterday being my birthday, celebrating online with women who like really know my heart, really know my soul. I've got my in life friends here, 30 years plus, wouldn't trade them for everything under the sun. They're gold. And that community is priceless and comes with like a lot of other, as you described, opportunity, provision, abundance. Um, and that is, I think, I'm going to say, like, you have a very visionary view where you can see from 40,000 feet up everything that's happening. And when we're first starting out, that can be really hard because there's bills to pay, or there's this, or we're pressuring ourselves, or we're making rash decisions in a shorter time frame. And that it is not really, the most practical way to go about things. So would you, now knowing and now having built Found Her and being a mentor and a leader and like a community builder, what would you say to the version of you when you were leaving Hearst and starting Bump Club?
That you have to be patient. And I think that this is really important. It's really important that you show up consistently and you do the work consistently
Yeah.
and you don't give up. Businesses aren't built overnight. And I tell the women in my mentorship this, like, you are running a marathon. This is not a sprint. And we live in a world today where you open up social media and you have people telling you that you're going to make X number of dollars in a month, or you're going to increase your followers by thousands and thousands in a couple weeks because of some hacks. Businesses aren't built on hacks. Businesses are built on solid foundations of everyday principles.
Yeah.
And if you are not putting those principles into place with your business, you are never going to make the money or get the followers or achieve those goals. It is so important that you are patient and that you put in the time, because it's the only way you are going to build a sustainable business. I think there's so much emphasis today put on like virality and,
Yeah.
going viral and doing all these things. Those things don't pay you, and they are not going to give you a business that you will have forever and will pay you forever. And I think it's really important to say that, like, you can have a post that goes viral and not earn a penny from
Mhm.
it. Those things are unimportant. And the other thing that I think is really important to say in this whole conversation of me saying you need to be patient is, a lot of the people who are telling you not to be patient and they're trying to give you hacks and tricks and whatever, it's not comparing apples to apples, because these are people who have teams, who
Mhm.
have budgets,
Mhm.
who are doing things that it doesn't align with what you're doing. So they can tell you how to do something, but it's not going to work the same because they have different resources than you and you don't
Yeah.
see that. So my whole thing is that it is so important that you really build a strong foundation for your business based on truth, based on consistency, and that you play through that every single day. And once you start doing that and you start gaining traction, which I've seen with hundreds of people in my mentorship, that is when you can start adding some of these other things to the mix. So you have to be patient.
1000%. Yeah. And this is the test of, do you really want it? Or do you want the glitzy dream, like the romanticized idea concept of what it is? You know, you can't get the beach body without freaking going to the gym and lifting the weights and grunting and sweating and straining, y'all. You gotta put the work in. And so let's talk a little bit then about some systems. What were you supporting the business and the home life with? We mentioned dear Patricia, shout out Patricia, the nanny. And that too, like, motherhood's a journey. Building a business during motherhood is next level. Like, this is Olympic training. But I want to come back and just highlight again that Lindsay said when her daughter was with the nanny, Lindsay was working, dialed in, and being a good steward of that time. And that doesn't mean that she didn't rest and immerse herself in motherhood elsewhere, but she used that time very smartly to focus on something else. And that's a beautiful way of being more than one thing at once, right? Being a new mom and being an ambitious entrepreneur and holding the space for that together.
So you asked me about some systems, and so I can't remember a lot of the early systems, but I can remember some of the things that I did that I think were very instrumental in me growing this business. So number one was obviously the nanny, which you said, but number two was so you have to remember when I started this business, it was events first. It was an events based business, and with events come a lot of like actual physical heavy lifting and moving, and I was living in the city, which it is hard to host events in the city because there's nowhere to park and there's just like nowhere to do anything.
Yeah.
And so I actually hired someone to help me before I paid myself. So I had a woman who became my first employee who reached out to me. She had just graduated grad school. And she said to me, I've never had a job before because I went to summer camp my whole life and I was a counselor and that was her job. And she's like, and I have no business experience. I will do anything for you.
Mm.
And she was very ambitious and just a very hard worker. And so I started paying her hourly to do the things that took me a lot of time and a lot more time because now I had a baby in tow. So basically she started setting up all my events for me and I would just walk in and everything would be there for me. And she was kind of my right hand in doing a lot of the things that it took me a lot of time. What that allowed is that freed up my time to spend time on actual business, on getting sponsors, on building partnerships. And so instead of doing this like nitty gritty stuff to host an event that
Yeah.
really anyone could do, she was doing that and I was paying her hourly. And it was interesting because she was also looking for a job at the time. And I knew that, a full-time job. And she said to me one day, we got this amazing partnership with Microsoft and we were hosting these events in the suburbs with them. And we were driving back to the city and she said, Lindsay, like I just really want to work for you. And I said to her, like, be patient. I said, I know, and thank you for saying that. I'm going to bust my butt to get a sponsorship to pay you for the next, for at least your first year's salary.
Yeah.
And I did. And I
Yeah.
did. And so, and I went and I really like dialed the dollars and it was Abbott Labs actually, funny enough, that I got them to sign a full year contract with me and that allowed me to pay an employee. And
Hmm.
knowing that I had this right hand person
Hmm.
allowed me to then call more sponsors and get more
Yeah.
money into the company. And so, that is something too that I think a lot of people when they're starting businesses, they think they need to pay themselves first. And no, you should be the last person that's paid. If you are recognizing what someone else can do so that you can focus on what's important for the business, then you are going to come out on top in the end. You might not maybe not in the short term. You might not be
Yeah.
paying yourself in the short term, but in the long run, your business is going to thank you for that. And so that was one of the things that I did early on, was that I hired help and I recognized that. And then on that note, I continued to really recognize where I could use help that was, sucking the life out of me. And I
Hmm.
eventually hired a bookkeeper.
Hmm.
And eventually that bookkeeper became, a part-time like CFO because
Hmm.
as the company grew,
Yeah.
I'm not good at finances. And I
Yeah.
recognize that. Like I'm just I don't look I can't see financial models like that. I'm a marketer.
Yeah.
And so that was something too that I recognized that helped me to grow. And over time, I found very creative ways to find people to help me with the business. I was employing people part time.
Hmm.
I had contractors. You didn't always have to have a 6-figure CMO to help you out. When I sold the business, I had 8 full-time employees. So it was definitely something that we grew over time, obviously. But I also had 15 part-time employees that like were
Right.
were hourly that were helping
Yeah.
to host events around the country. So
Yeah.
I share this because these are the systems that really allowed me to get creative and allowed me to build the business without having to, pay people these huge full-time
Mhm.
salaries. And at the same time, I was providing moms an opportunity to work and to own something, which I knew.
Uh-huh.
And without the stipulation of working a 9 to 5. And you have to remember, most of this was before COVID. So, like, most of this was before you were able to, like, really work from home and Zoom
Mhm.
was a thing. And, and so it was very interesting to me to watch these women who really wanted to work. They wanted something of their own. And I felt so amazing that I was able to give that to them. I didn't care if they worked at 8 p.m. or 10
Yeah.
p.m. Like, it didn't matter to me as long as they were getting their job done. And we developed a team of women. Everyone on my team was a mom except for like two people.
Mhm.
So, and those women were like full-time like coordinators that helped with the business. But, so I think that these are very important things to think about as you're growing your business. It's like, where can you find the help that doesn't require a full-time salary, and what kind of projects can you
Yeah.
unload on an hourly basis, and who can you get in that may take something like flexibility and prioritize it over the paycheck. So these are all things that you want to think about.
Yeah, you created an ecosystem for women to participate in. You created an ecosystem in the systems as well for women to benefit from. That young grad learning about business, mentoring, very hands-on with logistics, different things like that. So there's a lot of beautiful things happening around there. All the while, you're taking care of yourself so that you can continue to grow the vision. And delegating for an ambitious, overachieving, everyday woman can be like, loss of control. But this is actually the area of so-called discomfort to lean into and allow in order for you to be more. An Olympic athlete has an entire team supporting them, right? And I love the simplicity and the different versions of how we can bring those people in. And there are, dear listener, a lot of different ways that you can just do piecemeal work with somebody to do your marketing or to do your budgeting or to do your graphics, whatever, right? There's a lot
Yeah.
of different ways to do that. And you don't have to stick with just the one person that you hire if they're not going to be good. You just experiment until something clicks, like
Yep.
dating, and then start to build your
Totally.
team. Yeah. So now I'd love to just give some time here, I guess, at the end to talk about Dear FoundHer. And, so you sold Bump Club, and then where are we after that point? And tell me everything
Well,
about.
that we would be here for a long time, but so I sold the company, and like I said, I do not regret the sale of the company. It
Yeah.
did not pan out the way that I wanted it to. I mean, I was basically sold a promise of, we're going to give you rocket fuel to build your business and to make Bump Club a household name.
Okay.
And when I after the sale and after I got in there, it didn't pan out that way.
Yeah.
There was a lot of arguing. There was a lot of me telling them you're in breach of contract. There was a lot of
Mhm.
me, pushing back on them. Um, there were things that happened through the sale of the company that had it took like a year for them for example, they bought me for my relationship with Target.
Mhm.
We went into this new company, and they said to me, "Okay, your team isn't going to handle Target. You're going to turn that over to our team." And guess what? Target didn't respond to them for a year, 1 year. We were not working with Target, and that revenue,
Yeah.
my earnout was dependent on that revenue.
Yeah.
And that was so short-sighted to me because they bought my relationship and they
Yeah.
didn't let us continue that relationship.
Yeah.
And when I finally said to them, you got to let my team reach back out to Target, guess who ended up selling a deal to Target that was seven figures on repeat? And oh, yes, we even saved it during COVID by turning it into a virtual program. I
Mhm.
mean, it was really crazy, some of the
Yeah.
things that they did. So when I left, it was really like I couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't handle people. I would wake up in the morning and like I'd have three new meetings on my calendar. I wouldn't even know what they were.
Okay.
It was I was not in control of my time.
Mhm.
I was being abused. I was definitely being abused from many different aspects, and it was not how I wanted to live my life. And so I said to my husband, like, if I have to get a full-time job, like I will, but I
Mhm.
can't even get that job until I leave
Yeah.
because no one knows. And I have such a vast network of people. I can't even really tell. Like, I want to be able to publicly tell people, like, I'm leaving and I'm for hire.
Yeah.
So when I left, Bump Club actually became my first client. And that was because a lot of the knowledge of the business was still in my head and they hadn't extracted it and they couldn't do anything without it. So
Mm.
they became my first client. And that allowed me like a 2 to 3 month buffer of me to say to people, I'm leaving
Mhm.
and I'm for hire while I still had this 10-hour a week client that was my company.
Mhm.
So when I left, I did take a vacation. So I left and I took a vacation. And it was on that vacation that we were hiking in Colorado and I had this idea for Dear FoundHer. And I had this idea
Mhm.
I said, I really want to be there to support women business owners. I have now changed that and it's women business owners over 40
Yeah.
because of the people who were coming to me. And it just made more sense to put that stake in the ground. And since doing so, my business has really grown a lot.
Mhm.
But very similar to, 16 years ago when I started Bump Club, I very much wanted to support women in this way. And I am not one to keep things a secret. And
Yeah.
I figured this is an amazing platform for me to share all of my knowledge about building a business
Yeah.
and growing a business and share my network and share my connections. And so that is why I started Dear FoundHer. It didn't start so simply as like me starting a podcast. What happened was when I left Bump Club and I finally was able to tell people, I sent out an email and I said, and I call it that email. This is like
Okay.
what I tell everyone to do. When you're making a change in your business, you need to tell people or else they won't know.
Yeah.
It's very simple, but it's the truth. And so I sent an email to everyone in my address book and I said, I'm not sure if you're aware or if you saw my social post, but I am leaving Bump Club and Beyond, the company that I started. I am going to be taking on clients, and here are some of the things that I could do. And it
Mhm.
was like social media strategy, marketing strategy, influencer strategy, like just the things that I did to build Bump Club. And within a couple of weeks, I ended up having two more clients just from that email, from
Right.
telling people that I was taking clients. So I started by doing that. And then I had this idea for the podcast and I started building it. That was like in the fourth quarter of 2021. And in January of 2022, I launched the podcast. And Dear Founder really just launched as a podcast first.
Mhm.
And it was through listening and through the conversations that I had with my listeners on social media that I then started a group mentorship because people wanted to work with me and they couldn't pay my consulting fees. So they were like, how
Yeah.
can I work with you? So it started first as just a one-on-one mentorship. And then that just felt very inefficient. I was telling the same thing to everyone. And so I started a group mentorship.
Mhm.
And then that group mentorship said to me at the end of their 8th month, what's going to happen at a year? We still want to be in your ecosystem. So
Right.
I created a community that they could go
Mhm.
into, and I invited other people in that community.
Mhm.
And then they wanted more information online. And so I started a newsletter this past year. And then they said to me, well, we want to meet in person.
Yeah.
So we started hosting events. We now host networking events in Chicago, and I host a big event called Dear FoundHer on Tour. We did 5 stops last year where we went into different markets and we did a whole night on how to navigate your post 40 pivots with two of my most downloaded guests, Sunny and Jen, who are lifestyle influencers over the age of 50. Jen is actually Jen Sherman from Peloton, and Sunny is her best friend. And it's an amazing event. So all of these things came to be over the last 5 years from listening to my community and
Mhm.
them telling me this is what we want. And that is how I started Dear FoundHer and really have grown it into this movement
Yeah.
for women business owners over 40. And very similar to what you said at the top of this, like you said, you started Bump Club because you needed it.
Mhm.
I started this community because I needed it.
Yeah.
Yes, I have an amazing network of female founders and women business owners, but I often say I am just as much a participant of the
Yeah.
Dear FoundHer community as I am the founder and CEO.
Yeah.
And I need this community as much as it needs me.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly in contact with the women in the community. It's not just like that I put things up and run away. I mean, like
Yeah.
these
You're
these
not
women
Taylor
have become my
Swift coming out to
no, these
sing
women
and like you're
they've
in it
become
with
my
them.
friends.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
one of them, and there's hundreds of women in it, but like one of the original women was in Chicago on Friday, or this past weekend, doing college tours with her daughter. I met
Yeah.
her for dinner on Friday night.
Yeah.
I've, whenever I'm in a city where,
Mhm.
there are women there, I try to see them. I try to get together with them. So, I share that because it's so important to recognize that and to be a part of what you're building.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it removes any sense of hierarchy, which can be toxic if a community leader is too good to be on the ground with you,
Yeah.
right? And I have that same, I'm going to call it heart print, where my work, I'm in it as much as a participant as I am as the facilitator and owner of it. And it's such a more holistic and connected way of growing something meaningful and authentic when you are the work and you're with the others in it. And it's a beautiful marketing advantage, competitive advantage to just be a very real woman. And you guys, Lindsay, so much we've heard this incredible, portfolio of life, and she's not immune from running behind because she all of a sudden has to take her kids to school, right? Which happened at the start of the show. And it's like, okay, well, she's not okay. Email, no problem. I'll wait gladly and honor that we are very real women doing very real things, and not for some sensation or some quick win, but for the very like robust meaning and results that come from that. And that is worth the patience, and that is worth the effort, that is worth the money coming last or later. It is worth all those things because now I'm going to assume and put back to you, you living your best life ever every day and just in awe of the reality that you created for yourself and where it's going to take you next.
I will say I feel very, very fortunate and very lucky. I know I still work hard. I mean, I was up last night like
Right.
working on my newsletter at
Yep.
10 p.m. because I spent the day with my kids yesterday. It was Martin Luther King Day and they were off. But I feel that I have created this life for myself with great intention. And yes, the sale of my company maybe didn't pan out the way I wanted it to, but
Mhm.
it, like I said earlier, it gave me the skills and the ability to do what I'm doing now. And that is support other women. And that is what I want to be doing. And I feel very fortunate to have created this opportunity for myself.
Yeah.
And I will say it did not come without a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
And it also has come with me showing up every day as myself. Like,
Mhm.
people say what would be like the key to your success? Like, I have showed up every single day since I became an entrepreneur, whether it's me talking about, my stretch marks and my itchy belly
Mhm.
when I'm pregnant and being
Mhm.
myself in that regard,
Yeah.
or me showing up and saying, you know what, like, it was a really shitty experience when I sold my company and being honest about it.
Mhm.
Like, whatever it's been, I have been me, and that really has what has lent itself to my success.
That's the strength, and that's where everybody put your hand on your chest and just breathe it in and say, I am enough. I am enough just as I am, right? And that's what we want. We want to see leaders of all shapes and sizes coming together in community for that real connection and that real day-to-day stuff that we're all experiencing. I don't want to be in a group where the woman pretends she doesn't fart like we
Right.
all do.
Totally.
And that we have to normalize that. It's far more rich when we take it to that level and keep it at that level, right? Yeah,
Totally.
beautiful. So you're 5 years into founder? Is that about right?
Well, Dear Founder started in 2022, so four, but
Okay,
like four and some change into
this
this
version.
chapter.
So
Yeah.
you're going to run it in this model for a little bit and just see where it takes you next.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I really have put a lot of focus on building up the online community and the networking community. That is something that has been really important to me. And,
Mhm.
and I make changes as we go. I'm not
Yeah.
married to anything in particular.
Yeah.
I would say, very much like we talked about, like I listen to my community, and that's really how I choose to run the business. I also do consulting projects, like for various, women-owned companies in the marketing space.
Hmm.
And I would say the biggest change for me is I've become much more selective about
Yeah.
which projects I'm taking on and who I'm working with. Those are the projects that really kept the lights on in the beginning of starting Dear FoundHer
Yeah.
before I had a paid mentorship and a paid community. But I do really like a lot of that work. And I just took on a new client, and I'm very excited about her. And I'm going to be managing her she's a bigger personality, and I'm going to be managing her whole personal brand and her speaking engagements. And I'm excited about this because the way that I look at marketing is from this very holistic approach. I call it SWEEP. It stands for social media, website, emails, events, partnerships, and publicity. And it's going to allow me to really apply the principles of sweep to her brand. And I'm
Hmm.
hoping that, in the end, I end up taking on a few different clients managing their brand this way. And
Right.
I'm very excited about it. So, and again, I wouldn't have taken it if I didn't believe in it or if I didn't want to do it.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, we could talk about so much for so much longer, but we're going to get back to the rest of our day. So thank you so much for joining me and sharing your journey and the woman behind the journey. You guys, if you want to stay in Lindsay's space, her newsletter is called The Founder Files, and we'll pop the link in the show notes. And you can subscribe. Marketing visibility can be one of the most challenging and yet key pieces for new female entrepreneurs. So learn from the experts, women like Lindsay, and play in models that are going to work for you and get your business and your mission out there because we need it. We need each and every one of us.
Thank you so much, Mia, for having me, and happy birthday.
Thanks, Lindsay. Have a great rest of your day.